Hello and welcome to the Terra Nova Fairy Podcast with Big Mike and the boys. I'm Big Mike, and here are some boys. Tony and Liam, how's it going?
How are you? How you doing, Mike?
Hey Mike, how are you?
Not so bad. How are you getting on? Are you excited for this exclusive special episode?
Oh yes, feeling magical.
We're going to learn a thing or two about fairies, I think. I'm excited for that.
I'm fairly sure.
So this is the first ever episode of the Terra Nova Fairy Podcast. For those of you who don't know me and the boys, we host our own podcast called Would You Rather with Big Mike and the boys. That can be found on every podcast app or at bigmikepod.com.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know about Terra Nova Fairy Garden, I'm not sure how you got to this podcast, but we'll explain a little bit about it.
Good work.
So,
Mike, should we tell them now that our other podcast is more for mammies and daddies?
oh yeah, so our own podcast does have a few bad words. So if you're one of our smaller listeners today, maybe give it a few years before you listen to it. But mammy and daddies should enjoy it. So Terra Nova Fairy Garden, it's a little family-run business here in County Limerick. It's actually my parents' business, Deborah and Martin. So right now I'm recording from Terra Nova Fairy Garden. It's pretty exciting, huh?
Live and exclusive.
Ooh.
Where are you boys? Where in the world are you?
We're in Prague, Czech Republic.
Yes.
And what's the weather like there?
Pretty cold. We just finished the snow for the winter, so it's still quite cold.
Well, we might get more eventually. Who knows?
Who knows?
No one knows.
So yeah, Terra Nova Fairy Garden, if you haven't been here, it's like nowhere else. It's a visitor's garden, which there are many of them in Ireland, but not many of them have all the fairy residents that Terra Nova has. So anyone can come, anyone would enjoy it, but definitely kind of a whole family together would really get the best enjoyment out of it. So you come along, you get a little fairy story at the gate, and you follow a little story as you go around the garden, spotting all the little fairies everywhere as you go. So it's a great place for plant lovers and fairy lovers alike. Liam, you've been to Terra Nova. What do you think of it?
I've been there many times. I love it there, Mike. It's my happy place.
It's we've said before that kind of nothing feels real when you're here.
No. Talking to Mr. Earhart and having the crack in the tie house. It's a real escape from real life.
Yeah, really great. And Tony, you haven't been here, but I'm sure you'll be here in the future.
I've never been, but I've heard many things.
Many things. You've heard all about all the fairies and all their mischief.
Oh yeah, I've heard many things.
Excited to hear some more.
I'm excited to hear some more, exactly.
So Tony, when you think of a fairy, what do you think of? What do you picture?
I suppose it's a picture like Tinkerbell, don't you? Something like that.
I thought you were going to say that, and that is what most people would kind of think of when they think of a fairy. That is the physical representation that most people give to fairies. It's like little pretty girls in lovely dresses with wings. But if you actually look into it, a fairy is a type of mythical being or legendary creature found in the folklore of multiple European cultures. So it's kind of a form of spirit. They're often described as metaphysical or supernatural. So fairies are kind of like spirits. It's not just that there are fairy figurines here at Terra Nova, but there's real fairies. So actually, in the field behind the garden, there's a real-life fairy fort. It's a ring fort, densely populated with trees, like a mini forest in the middle of a field. So that's where all the fairies from Terra Nova actually come from. So it's said that the fairies live there and defend them. Have you heard many stories about the fairy forts, lads?
Yeah, I've heard stories of people doing things to them and then something bad happening, actually. It's like their home, basically, you know? So you wouldn't mess with it because they're fairies and magical.
Yeah, I was always taught don't be messing with the fairy fort because it's not good karma. Like,
Yeah, exactly. So fairies are good beings. They're not bad, but they're just very protective of their homes. So they just want to look after where they live and where they come from.
and that's the same as anyone wants, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, if people were coming to mess with your house, you wouldn't be happy either. Some people believe that leprechauns hide their gold in a fairy fort, but I definitely wouldn't suggest going and digging and looking for it.
No, wouldn't be a good idea.
No, I mean, the idea of leprechauns, really they're only the same as the idea of a fairy, just given a different kind of physical representation, aren't they? They're like magical beings that live in the forts, that live all around Ireland.
Are they exclusive to Ireland, leprechauns, Mike?
See, leprechauns are very much an Irish thing that's been taken as a tourist type thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so leprechauns are only Irish, but I believe that they are just the same as the fairies, just seen differently.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of folk tales about fairy forts, which talk about like curses or retribution being enacted upon those who disturb or destroy the structures. There's one story that suggests a man who had ordered workmen to level a fairy fort at Duneva in County Clare simply fell dead. But don't worry, because his wife, who was a white witch, brought him back to life.
Oh, that was lucky.
It was really lucky that he was married to a white witch.
Very lucky.
And that she was able to bring him back to life. That was great.
Yeah.
But I'd say he learned his lesson still.
Of course he did.
I'd say so.
He won't be messing with that again.
And a more recent story, Sean Quinn, who in 2008 was the richest person in Ireland. In 2011, he filed for bankruptcy. And a lot of people believe that his financial ruin was blamed on the fact that he moved to Fairy Fort.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it did come at the same time as a recession. But but he moved that Fairy Fort, and it's not good karma.
No.
Maybe that's why the recession happened.
Maybe that would be extreme. They take it out on all of us. I don't think the fairies are
That malicious.
mean.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my dad, he tells me a story about how in the 90s, when I was only a little fella, him and a friend were climbing up the hill, which was a few fields behind our house. When they were coming back, it had become dark, and it took them hours to find the house again, when it should have taken like literally about 20 minutes through the fields. When my dad told this story a few weeks later to someone, the person asked if there was a fairy fort between them and the house when they got lost. And it turns out if there's a stranger present, the fairies can often make them lose their way to protect their homes.
And your dad would have known the area very well, wouldn't he?
Of course, yeah, he'd lived here years that stage already. And yeah, the fairies apparently, because there was a stranger with them, they played little tricks to keep them away.
But at least they let him find their way home eventually, right?
Yeah, I think eventually they just found a road.
Yeah.
So fairies are very protective of their homes, but obviously they are, for the most part, very good. A lot of people, so Liam, you would have experienced this, but Tony, not yet. A lot of people who come to Terra Nova truly, genuinely believe in the fairies. A lot of spiritual people come here and meditate in the garden, and they say that they feel a presence that they don't feel elsewhere. There is a kind of a different vibe once you walk in the gate. My mother said she's had many interactions with the fairies. The most impactful one was one day when she was gardening, she was picking a rake off the ground, and when she stood up, she could see bright lights all around, and it was as if she was in a completely different world. She said it was both mesmerizing and an out-of-body experience. So there's definitely something going on here.
But she didn't feel scared, or she wasn't nervous?
No, she said she was disorientated, mesmerized, and it felt out of body. And that's kind of what we say, like nothing feels real, everything feels kind of happy-go-lucky and easy here.
Yeah, very, very much so.
Yeah, like your biggest worries when you're here are often is that pixie doing the right thing? Is he in the right place? Should he be somewhere else? Would he look better over there? That's kind of the most of it. My dad says that maybe one of the reasons that the fairies really did come into the garden is in the early 90s. He used to go into the fairy fort. He asked the fairies first, obviously, because if you ask them nicely, they usually don't mind you doing stuff in their fort. I used to play there as a child, so it's not all bad to go in there. There's a moat all around it, so it's like a little raised hill in the middle, and there's like a big moat full of what I would call mud. And so he dug up what he said is leaf mold, so that must be what the mud is. So he dug that up. He said it had accumulated there for over 1,000 years. He dug it up and he brought it into the garden. And my mother said to him that he might be bringing fairies with him. And she was right, because ever since then they've felt the fairies' influence in the garden, ever since they brought the soil out of the fairy fort. But another way that fairies can play little tricks is there was a camera club that came to the garden. And after they left, in one of the little log cabins, there's little beds that the hoblins sleep in at night. The hoblins are kind of friendly goblin type creatures. They're lovely. You'll meet them when you come. But in their beds, someone had broken one of the beds after this club left. So my parents were pretty disappointed, but it just got fixed and it wasn't that big of a deal. But a few days later, my dad was outside on the road. Across the road, just in the ditch, was a memory card when he put the memory card into the computer, it had a picture of one of the people from the club actually sitting on that bed.
Oh my god.
So the fairy showed him exactly who did it.
That is incredible.
Yeah. And I don't think they've been back since.
And I like that one as well, because that's not really malicious. That's just quite cute and clever, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, just playing little nice tricks.
Suppose these guys have been around a lot longer than any of us. I was thinking, how would a fairy know what a memory card is? But of course they know everything.
Yeah, of course they do. Or maybe they just made the camera fall apart when they walked outside.
Maybe so.
So, another story from my dad was that in 1997, he dug a bed for a tree in the lawn near the front garden. They really wanted to plant a Tibetan? A cherry tree from Tibet is what they wanted to plant there.
Tibetan.
And my mother said, let's not make any compromises. So apparently they searched the garden centres of Ireland for this Tibetan cherry tree.
Is it not Tibetan? It's surely Tibetan.
Tibetan.
This cherry tree that came from Tibet. They searched a garden centres of Ireland. They apparently they went to most of them. They called up loads of them. No one had this tree. So one day they happened to be in a Dublin garden centre, and my dad said he saw this tree in the middle of all the birches. And apparently it was all green, it was all covered in slime and grunge, and he just, for some reason, he really wanted that tree. He just really wanted this random birch tree. So he picked it up, and in a rush he went to the till, and he was worried. He thought he wanted this tree so much that there's no way that they were actually going to sell it to him. He's just like, yeah, he had a moment of absolute madness. So he went up, and it cost him only £10. So pretty cheap for a tree. So they came home, and he liked this tree so much that they put it in that bed that was dug for the cherry tree. They'd given up on that. And apparently the next year, when it started to grow properly, they went and checked the books, and it was the exact tree they wanted.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And they couldn't find it anywhere in Ireland. And it was just in with these birch trees. And even though he didn't recognize it because there was no flowers or leaves,
He knew he wanted it.
he just wanted that tree. It's like the fairies told him that's it, that's the tree, get it. Get it now.
Get it now. Have a little panic attack. Have a little moment of...
Yeah. He also made a note that he brought some little Easter chicks that he found at the counter. He brought them home for me, and I actually remember those Easter chicks. I love them. So it was a great day for me too. I didn't care about the tree. That's nice.
So are these fairies just following him?
Yeah, well, I think maybe they just gave him the inspiration. Maybe they told him where to go. Told him what to look out for.
Very loyal. Very loyal.
Yeah.
Because he always asked for permission, that's why.
That's the important thing. We used to play there and we were nice and they never did anything to us. So it's not that you need to be scared of fairy forts. You just need to not abuse them.
Exactly. Be respectful. Always be respectful.
So, over on the Would You Rather podcast, every week I ask you two boys a Would You Rather question. So you pick between two options. Hence the name Would You Rather with Big Mike and the boys. So this week, here on the Terra Nova podcast, I thought we'd do something of the same. So I'm going to ask you a couple of little Would You Rather questions related to fairies. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah.
Can't wait.
Here we go.
So, would you rather live in a house made out of a mushroom or a teapot? So imagine that you're a little fairy-sized person. A lot of the fairy houses that you get, lots of them are like toadstools with like bright red and orange tops with nice little spots. Or you could live in a teapot. The difference here being that it's not a fairy house made of resin, it's an actual mushroom. And it's an actual teapot.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah. See, the teapot would be so much drier inside. I think the mushroom would be real smushy and yucky, the walls.
Yeah, it would be fungusy, definitely.
Be quite dark.
It would be quite dark.
Well, you'd have windows. Like you can cut out your doors and your windows and cover them with little sweet wrappers.
Mushroom might have all bugs and everything.
Yeah. But picture how big you are and how many bugs could you fit in even quite a big toadstool.
Yeah.
Not many bugs would actually fit in there. You'd be about the same size as them.
Teapot would have a bigger space, though.
Yeah.
Much bigger space.
The issue with the teapot is the spout.
Be okay. You can put a window in there.
It would act as a chimney.
It could act as a chimney.
Good. That's a good idea.
And the roof then, it could be a convertible house in the summertime.
Oh yeah, just lift off the lid.
Do a little bit of sunbathing.
Yeah. I am a fun guy, but I think I'm going to have to pick the teapot here.
Yeah, you think it'd be more... Do you think it'd be easier? Which would be more fun? More fun to think about.
I think the teapot as well, because I think like if you were that size, you could like make a slide out of the spout and slide into your bed.
Oh,
True.
that would be real nice.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to be using it as a chimney then, though. That'd be dangerous.
No. Or you'd be a chimney sweep. That's how you clean it.
Hey.
Yeah, true. And Tony?
Yeah, I think a teapot would be a lot nicer. Definitely. 100%. You can make it your own. You know, you're not going to be chopping bits out of mushrooms and stuff and ruining that nice little mushroom.
And a teapot's more like a normal house anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so Tony and Liam both said that they would rather live in a teapot than in a mushroom. But let us know over at Terra Nova Fairy Garden at gmail.com. What would you rather? Would you rather be a fairy or a gnome?
Oh, I don't know. Fairies can fly, can't they?
So fairies can fly. They're small. We'll imagine you are a Tinkerbell type, and you're the kind of fairy who could live in a teapot, or be like a garden gnome. So you can be going about doing your business, but a bit like the toys in Toy Story. Whenever a human comes along, you have to go back to your spot. And if you're a fairy, you just have to hide in general. People can only catch a glimpse of you, and you just look like a little ball of light.
It'd be a lot easier to hide, because I imagine little gnomes, they find it hard to move around. So if you got too far from your spot and you saw someone coming, I think you'd be struggling. You'd be doing a waddle to get back.
It's like a musical, musical chairs? No, the other one. Musical statues?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what's musical statues?
You're all dancing when the music is on, and then the music goes off. And you all have to stay in exactly the spot you're in, even if you're on one leg, or and if you fall over, if you move any bit, you're out.
Oh, yeah.
You're just like that. Carrying your mushroom to back home to get something to eat, and then you're like, you gotta stop.
And you'd be staring right at him as well.
Yeah. It'd be a lot easier to live with the fairy.
That's a good point. I'm picturing the fairies would be, along with the bees, they'd be drinking kind of nectar out of the flowers. That's what they'd be eating. And gnomes would definitely be eating mushrooms they find around the place.
Gnomes don't have magical powers though, do they?
No. Apart from the fact that you can stay really still and look like you're made out of
Porcelain
or resin or whatever you're made out of.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it'd be more fun to fly about and
Definitely.
yeah.
Not too high though. Not too high.
No, Tony's afraid of heights, aren't
Yeah,
you?
not too high.
You wouldn't fly as high as Iron Man. Is that what you were saying, Tony?
Exactly. I'd be a low-lying fairy.
Might even be a strolling fairy.
A strolling fairy, yeah.
And where would you keep your teapot? Hidden in a fairy fort?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be fun to live with all your friends, wouldn't it?
All your fairy friends.
Yeah.
Tea parties.
Okay, well, Tony and Liam both said that they would rather be a fairy than a gnome. But let us know at Terra Nova Fairy Garden at gmail.com. What would you rather? Right, lads, so that was our episode of the Terra Nova Fairy Podcast. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, like I said, magical.
Do you feel like you learned a bit more about fairies?
Oh yeah. And not just Tinkerbell.
Not just Tinkerbell, there's much more to it than that.
Yeah.
There's mushrooms and teapots and annoying gnomes and messing with camera clubs. There's loads to being a fairy. So yeah, as I said before, Terra Nova Fairy Garden is a nice visitor attraction. Come along, bring the family if you like. Come alone, people do that too. A lot of people like to come here and just soak in the vibes. And then once you've gone around the garden and you follow the story, you can pop into our gift shop. So our gift shop is located just inside a hobbit house that we made hopefully life-size for humans, not hobbits. And yeah, we have Ireland's biggest range of fairy doors, houses, fairies and accessories. And lots of other nice gifts as well. So it's always worth popping in, and it is quite reasonable. Wouldn't you say, Liam?
Oh, definitely. Do all my Christmas and birthday shopping there. It's perfect.
And he's not lying. So if you don't get a chance to come to Terra Nova Garden, or while we're closed, because we are only open for a few months in the summer, you can always shop online. So at terranovagarden.com. presumably where you're listening to this podcast now. But yeah, terranovagarden.com, and everything is there on the online shop. We ship to everywhere in Ireland and the UK. But yeah, I think that's a nice place to leave the episode, lads. So, as I was saying as well, we are Would You Rather with Big Mike and the boys. Probably better for mammies and daddies to listen to.
I definitely think so.
I 100% think so.
But yeah, so check us out on any podcast app, on YouTube, or at bigmikepod.com. But from me, Fairy Mike, thanks, bye.
Thanks, bye.
See you now.